Acton Finance Committee meeting to order. I'm going to have to read this due to our virtual meeting. Good evening. The open meeting of the Acton Finance Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth and the local state of emergency declared by the Acton Board of Selectmen and the Board of Health due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, the Board of Selectmen has suspended all public gatherings. And in accordance with the Governor's order, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The Governor's order allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so the public can follow along with the deliberations of the Finance Committee, in this case, and vote to the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment briefly in the beginning. For this meeting, the Acton Finance Committee is convening via telephone conference and video conference via Zoom and via the Zoom app, as posted in the meeting agenda on the town's website calendar identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and some attendees are participating via video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that folks may be able to see you. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Our documents, any documents that we'll have this evening will be on the DocuShare folder on the town's website as well. We have to put by the town's website. We now be attending we now start our meeting, returning to our first agenda item, but before we do, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and ensure accurate meeting minutes. I, Roland Borden, the chair of this year's chair of the Acton Finance Committee, will introduce each speaker on the agenda, if applicable. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. This helps to make the conference a lot clearer for everybody. Please remember to speak clearly and in ways that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait for the chair until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If a member wishes to engage publicly with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care of identifying yourself. For items with public comment, after the members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment. And I'm going to limit that to be as brief as humanly possible this evening. Each vote will be conducted by a roll call vote. Now that we have that out of the way, I will turn to our first agenda item, which is public participation. If there's anybody from the public that would like to be recognized, please raise your hand, and I see there is one. And call your, can you please identify yourself?
Hi, it's Tara from West Acton. Can you hear me?
Can you please state your last name as well?
Tara Fredericks from West Acton. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great, thank you. Shall I go then?
Yes, make it brief.
Okay, so I have 3 items to comment on. First of all, I'm sympathetic to Dave Martin's comments, and I got comments from other people on this about the idea of cutting human resources in this time. I think that's a bad idea. However, because I feel like we needed another social worker before the virus, but I do not want to fund an army of contact tracers for a variety of reasons, which I can highlight on email if you'd like. The second thing is I'd like to have you consider adding nonprofits to the business relief program. And thirdly, I urge you to ask the Board of Selectmen to put the eminent domain vote after the budget, because I think it's important for us to get the budgets out of the way and not have a lengthy conversation. I know of people who are planning to comment. I don't know how widespread their concern is, but I feel like getting the budgets out of the way is the main thing, and not to use the budgets as a way to, for political gain, if you want to pass the and a domain vote to have that after the budget so people can leave. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tara. Okay, that takes maybe out of a little bit of a, well, so the next agenda is FY 2021 budget and warrant articles we'll be reviewing, and I know our town manager, John Mangiarati, does have a presentation for the committee this evening. If you could go over that now, that'd be great. John?
Thank you. All right, I'll just share my screen here so we can all see the same thing. All right, so you see the presentation?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
So thank you. In May, we presented a revised budget to the Board of Selectmen, which was approved, and it was transmitted to the Finance Committee for its review. At the meeting last week, there was a great discussion about several items. One of the items that the Finance Committee asked for more information on was what are we doing considering the pandemic and any potential revenue shortfalls that we may see in 21. And so I put together this presentation to try to walk through exactly what we've done since March, what we're doing now, and what we plan to do if it becomes necessary to do so. So I will just walk through those items for you now, starting with the, hold on here. So first thing we'll go over is the current year, FY20, the revenues and expenses. I'm pleased to report that as of this morning, we've now received and collected 98% of the real estate taxes for the year. And we're up to 95% for this quarter. So we're in pretty good shape, almost on track to where we would be in a normal year. So that's great news. 95% of our motor vehicle is in the door. And then we've hit 90% of the budgeted fees and permits that we were planning for. And we've already hit 100% of our investment income. So the overall message for FY20 is that there is no significant deterioration in tax collections, and there are no revenue concerns in 20. We went over this a few weeks ago in the cash flow presentation. I think it was May 18th or thereabouts, and we presented information that said we were in decent shape at that point, and I think this information tonight shows that we're in great shape. So I'm pleased to start the presentation with that information. And I'd also like to talk a little bit about, on the expense side, some of the things that we've been doing since this all started happening in early March. We've taken several measures to try to achieve a turnback, to try to help prop up our reserves, to be prepared for any future uncertainties and be able to utilize reserves if necessary. We're shooting for a 2 to 4% turnback, hoping for $1 million. We have several measures in place to try to get us there. The biggest one, I guess I should say, is hiring. We've had several positions that were vacant either before the pandemic or have become vacant during the pandemic, and we are not rehiring those positions currently, or they're on hold. And doing so does create some hardships for services. Fortunately, we've been able to overcome those right now, and I think we're going to continue to do that. But what it does do is it frees up resources in our budget and allows us to turn back some of that money at the end of the year. We've also held off on any seasonal positions that we would normally be bringing in from the general fund this year. You may have heard that we're looking to open the beach at Nara later this month, and that will require seasonal positions, but those are all fee supported out of the rec revolving fund. So we're comfortable that we can keep any seasonal positions in the general fund on hold for now. We also put in place a non-essential spending freeze in early March. Non-essential means basically anything that isn't related to COVID or providing services that are essential to the community at the current time. We believe that will help to increase what's turned back at the end of the year. We have had significant expenses on COVID, and those expenses we are putting in for reimbursement. However, the reimbursement may not come in this fiscal year, or will not come in this fiscal year, but we still think that the spending freeze will certainly help us get through this year, the healthy turn back. There was some reference to buildings being closed and potential savings on utilities. I think we see that to some extent. Most of our buildings are pretty small. It's not like the schools with the huge buildings where there would be huge savings. But the library being closed for several weeks certainly should reduce the cost of what it usually is to run that building. Town hall has been open on a limited usage basis, but it has been open all along. So getting more into how we're handling this pandemic and how it's impacting us financially. As of this week, we are at the level where we are at about $425,000 in expenses that we can associate to the COVID response. That includes PPE, staffing, technology, cleaning, communications, equipment, stuff for the town, for the election we held yesterday, stuff we're going to be buying for the town meeting coming up, and then a whole new way of providing customer service that we're starting to build out currently. So that is something that we will be pushing forward to FEMA. Through the FEMA program, we can submit for reimbursement that $425,000, and whatever they deem to be within their program, they will give us a reimbursement of 75% at a date to be determined later. We've also put in for firefighter grants for PPE. The fire department uses probably the most PPE. If I had to calculate it, every call they're using it and having to discard most of it after every call. So they go through it pretty quickly. So we need to continue that supply, and we're seeking a grant to do that. Also, there's the CARES Act funding, which we've talked about, I think, at the last 2 or maybe 3 Finance Committee meetings. As we explained previously, we're eligible for just over $2 million for the years of FY20 and FY21, and that funding can be applied to any expenses between March and December of this calendar year. We are submitting an initial request to that program this week, which will be for the $425,000 less 75%, plus the $100,000 for the small business grant program, which we rolled out this week, which we've had a great response on. We have dozens of applications taken out. Almost 10 have already been submitted. So the program has really been very successful. We also have $50,000 for the rent subsidy program that we'll be submitting for. So those are all things that we hope to help with that problem and help us get through 20 without issue. We're also pursuing other programs through a different source of CARES Act funding. We made a presentation to the Board of Selectmen earlier this week about a micro enterprise grant program, which will help small businesses of less than 5 people, and it will also help public social service providers. So we're hoping that we're successful with that grant application. That is something we're working on right now, and it's due next week. So we're really trying to maximize the use of that funding, but also, very importantly, we're also making sure that we keep a lot of it on reserve with the hopes that it may be available in the future for uses, more flexible uses, such as filling revenue gaps. As of right now, that's not a current available use, but we don't want to spend too much of this now until we know whether or not that's an option for us in the future. So what has changed to our budget recommendation based on this whole situation? So in March, we presented, and both the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee approved our budget and municipal spending package, which was an operating budget increase of 2.5%, a minor decrease in subsidies, and a 31% increase in our capital program, for a total overall increase in spending from FY20 to 21 of 2.94%. So that was what was approved. That's what we were ready to go to town meeting, and then everything happened. So now that we're going back to town meeting at the end of this month, at the end of May, we presented a revised presentation to the Board of Selectmen of a slightly modified version of a 21 budget to try to account for a few things. We wanted to reduce revenue assumptions. We don't know. We don't have a level of certainty of what's going to happen, but we do know it's safe to assume that rather than projecting a minor increase in state aid, going back to zero initially is a safe move, and it puts us in a better position. So we dialed back all of our revenue assumptions, which we're going to discuss in more detail tomorrow with ALG. We are proposing to use less free cash, which is a result of a reduction in our capital plan. This is to better position us to have resources available in the event that we need them for things that come up, or if expenses happen later this year, we're adding more resources available to address those. And finally, we've spent a lot of time looking at contingency planning. And what do we do if there is a significant revenue shortfall? What if we do if there's a minor revenue shortfall? And we are, excuse me for a second. Sorry about that. My home office has a little activity this morning or this afternoon. So we are, again, planning on contingencies. We have been having discussions since March, really, of what we would do if we had bad news at the end of FY20, if we had to make changes in 20. Fortunately, we don't have to. What do we do if we have to make changes in 21? And we put together a whole list of things that we would try to do. But getting back to the revision to the capital plan, we've made two changes, or I guess three changes to the capital plan. We reduced the sustainability policy implementation from 200 to 185, and where we found a grant that we can use to offset that cost, and we hope that we'll get that in a few months. And we've reduced the complete streets and intersections projects from 250 to 100. We have several projects that are underway, and I think we can focus on the Main Street one at Prospect and the Main Street one in the center, and then push the other ones a little further down the line, and also try to get a jump on some of those earlier. One thing that we were looking to do was make sure we had designs in hand in the event that there was some sort of federal or other aid available for shovel-ready projects like we saw 10 years ago. We want to have projects ready to go if that happens. So we do want to keep a design. We do want to keep the design money in here, but we think we can reduce it a little bit to help reduce what we're asking for from free cash. And then finally, the change to Kelly's Corner, which in March, when the Finance Committee and the Selectmen approved it and sent it up to town meeting, the number was 1.3 million for that project. It was reduced to 1.2, and then it's continuing to reduce over the last few months due to the great work of our staff, particularly Kristen Bouchard. She's negotiated and worked with Mass DOT to get them to take on more of the right-of-way acquisitions that were part of the project, so that the total amount that we need right now has reduced to $600,000, which is great news. So the state is going to take on a major bulk of all the right-of-way acquisitions. We'll be responsible for a smaller portion, which accounts for $600,000. And we also have a $500,000 sidewalk program, which is included in our borrowing articles, for a total reduction of 150 to 100 used in capital. So the total result from that is, whereas before we were increasing capital by 31%, we are now leveling it with the prior year. The total municipal spending package that the Board of Selectmen approved in this revised budget goes from 2.94% increase down to a 2.34% increase. And we feel that this puts us in a position to continue the business of the town, but also be able to react and address any concerns that come up throughout the year, and continue to plan for the out years, which we are doing right now. So this is just speaking more to what's going to be discussed tomorrow morning at the Acton Leadership Group financial plan, just to walk you through a little bit of those changes. We've made some adjustments that we hope is supported tomorrow, reducing state aid by $22,000, reducing local receipts to level it with FY20, reducing new growth slightly, putting more into overlay and exemptions, and also, as a result of the reduction of the capital plan, we'd like to reduce the use of free cash. And because the fire station project, Steve Barrett presented to you last meeting how the project was initially going to be borrowed for 30 years, but because of instability in the market, we did a short-term note for 1 year, and there was a savings in that resulting. So we would reduce the amount that we need to pull from excluded revenue by $394,000. So the total reductions in revenue are $885,000 that we're going to be discussing tomorrow, and I look forward to your input or questions or concerns on tonight. And so to add all that stuff up and to look at what was approved last week in the ABRSD assessment, so we're reducing our municipal spending package by $215. They reduced the school district assessment by $428. We heard from Minuteman that they are changing their budget, but it's actually not going to impact our assessment at all. So it's a net zero change. And then the reduction in the debt exclusion. So the total change on the expense side was over $1 million in ALG expenses. And if you compare that to the revenues, so we're reducing revenues by $885, we're reducing expenses by $1 million. The net position, if it's approved, would be $152,000, which we would suggest is retained to help preserve our reserves for use if they're needed.
I'm going to need to correct that last part, says net position, because you have an extra digit in there.
Yes, it's true. I do have an extra digit in there, but it's 152,000, not whatever that says. So this is getting to very, very closely to the point of what was raised at the end of the meeting last week. What are the contingency plans? I went through what the contingency plans are in detail, but I think there was a request to provide a little bit more detail, and I think I provided here a lot more detail. So I look forward to your input. So what we did is we looked at hypothetical revenue considerations. We're projecting almost 1.4 million in state aid, not school state aid, and we're projecting 5.5 million in local receipts. So if we look at what happens if there's a 5% shortfall in state aid, $70,000. 10% shortfall, $140,000. 15%, $210,000. And if there's also a shortfall in local receipts, the numbers are shown here. 5% would be $278,000. 10% would be $556,000. 15% would be $834,000. So worst case scenario, both things happened, and there was a reduction in state aid and a reduction in local receipts. You can see that worst case scenario, 15% reduction, we're over $1 million of a shortfall. So we need to be able to prepare, and we have prepared to address any of those scenarios and several others. And the way we've done that is the following levers. So one thing we could do in 21 is we could keep the hiring freeze in place. It would result in impact on services, but we would be able to figure out a way to do it for a temporary basis, and that could save us up to $650,000 based on the current vacancies and an appropriate amount of benefits associated with them. We could continue, as we always do, to look at potential reorganizations. An example of that would be taking 3 positions that do 3 things and creating 2 positions that do all 3 of those things. And that's something that I do anyways as a manager, but it's something that we would have a greater focus on and more momentum to do if the scenario is presented. We could also look at the subsidies. We reduced the subsidies a little bit this year, and if necessary, we could look to do more reductions in subsidies. It may result in a reduction in services that are provided through those programs, but it's a lever that we could use if necessary. We could also look at implementing or continuing some type of spending freeze or delaying capital projects. And we could do that to the amount that's necessary. The capital plan that's before you is $675,000. So that's what I use as a number, but there's certainly several other saving opportunities within the spending freeze option for us. And then finally, we can consider further service level reductions. And in this scenario, what we would do is use the ability that I have with the bottom line budget and looking at the needs of the community. We had a caller earlier on this program that mentioned that some needs we've had in the past may be greater in the future, depending on what happens with everything. And that having a bottom line budget would allow us and me to work with the Board of Selectmen and staff to identify what makes sense, which of these levers to use to fill any gaps that are created by potential revenue shortfalls. For service level reductions could be reducing hours of services. It could be canceling or discontinuing services. It could be changing programs to operate differently and at a lower cost. It could be canceling planned public investments. Those are all things that we can do throughout a fiscal year. And if you add all of those things up, it's much more than $1 million, which is what I projected on a previous slide for what a 15% shortfall would equate to. But I would suggest that any shortfall we have using these levers and the authority provided within a bottom line budget gives us a great deal of flexibility to handle anything that happens in 21. And we're going to watch it closely. We've been monitoring cash flow, and we will very closely monitor it each month and quarter of FY21. And if there are issues that we see in the trends or collections or otherwise, or if we get news from the state that tells us we need to do certain things, we have several options and contingencies that we can put into place. And I'm confident that our team will be able to put plans in place to preserve as much services as possible, but also get us through a difficult time that may be ahead in 21. So next steps. As I mentioned, we're going to continue to closely monitor receipts and cash flow. We're going to continue, like we have, chasing grants and pursuing alternative revenue sources. In the last 2 years, we've brought in more than $1.1 million in grants, which has made a significant impact on limiting how much we need to invest of our free cash or other resources to do projects for our community. And we're going to continue to do that to allow us to use other resources and preserve our resources, especially our reserves for when we need them. We're going to work with MMA and our state and federal delegation to continue to advocate for local aid and in this case, potential revenue backfills if there is a shortfall. And we're going to continue as we have and as I have since day one in identifying and implementing cost savings and efficiency measures. So I really appreciate the Finance Committee and the input that you provide on a regular basis. And I know that you would help in this situation if we were faced with one next year. I know that I could come to you and get some great feedback on options before us. And I know that we could work together to get through 21 with the plans that we have in place. That's the presentation. So thank you for your questions.
Thank you, John. Can you, I can't see it, but can you close your?
Yep.
Thanks, Morgan. Perfect, thank you. Finance Committee. Questions? Mr. Cole, I'll let you go first.
Great, thank you. As you can guess, I do have a number of topics I'd like to touch on. Thank you for putting the presentation together. That's a very good start. First of my questions, you say that you're going to have a turnback of about $1 million. Now, is that net of the COVID reimbursements, or is that independent of the COVID reimbursements? I guess my question is, if you've got $1 million in turnbacks, but 425,000 of that is tied up in waiting for FEMA refunds, which will not come by the end of this month. That $1 million turnback is not going to, is it or is it not going to flow to accretive to the 5.5 million in free cash, that combined free cash and stabilization fund that we have now? That's my first question.
I will answer part of it and ask Steve to help with the rest. To answer your question about COVID expenses and cash flow, the reason that we're putting in a request this month, or this week rather, is to bring in an initial infusion of that support in FY20 to help with cash flow in FY20. So it would not be, as I mentioned, it would be 25% of the 425. So it's not going to be the full amount that we spent, but it will help to make sure that expenses towards COVID are not taking away from our turnback in FY20. Steve, do you want to take the rest of that question?
I will follow that.
Absolutely, John. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So in terms of, I think, Part B, any turnback or the turnback in the general fund goes towards our reserve replenishment. As the FinCom knows, there's different pieces of the reserve replenishment. The other thing is, and you know, it's kind of interesting, things are moving along, you know, and things change here and there, but at the end of the day, we're going to take the COVID-19 expenses, and as John said, we're going to be able to charge those off to a grant and be held harmless, and those expenses will be covered. So, you know, we believe we're in good shape on a turnback front, and that any, you know, unexpended budget funds will go right to the bottom line in terms of reserve replenishment.
And we're working to hit the 1 million mark regardless of COVID, I guess is the message.
Okay, so it's independent of getting the reimbursement. You're expecting that, you know, obviously I allow for the possibility that things are going to change in the next 27 days, but you're expecting that our certified free cash comprised of both the $2 million stabilization fund and the rest of the free cash is going to be closer to 6.5 million than the 5.5 that we have now. Is that accurate?
No, that's not, Jason. So let me back you up a little bit. The FY20 budget, if you went to the ALG plan, you'll see that the FY20 budget utilized 1.7 million in reserves. And at 6/30/19, our reserve position consisted of two items: free cash of 3.8 million and 2 million in stabilization, or a total of 5.8 million. Theoretically, the way DOR does the accounting, we will need to replenish 1.7 million to remain at that $3.8 million number for the general fund for free cash, and we still have our 2.0 million. So right now, you know, our goal is to maintain our reserve level. When John came in, we had dipped down to 2.6 million. John wanted that change pronto, and we moved up to 3.8 million as of 6/30/19. So, you know, again, I think we utilized 1.7 million in FY20. Our plan right now is to push hard for a total replenishment of 1.7 million. And if you think about it, it's in a, you know, kind of a tough year. It's the kind of the end, the beginning of all of this. So we're hoping our reserve position is stable and is exactly what it was around 6/30/19.
Okay, sorry, point of clarification. You just said that the ALG meeting from last year was to use 1.7 million, and we're looking to get a turn back of 1 million. Is that accurate? So that would be a net reduction in overall reserves by 700,000, correct?
No, not really, because you got, and here's where some of the details are, you know.
Even Brian's shaking his head.
Well, you got to remember, and again, you guys all have details in your line of work. When we talk about reserve replenishment, John makes money on both sides of the ball. John makes money on the revenue side, the expense side, We have grant charge-offs. There are different levers, even on a DOR statutory adjustment basis that, you know, once you're dealing with them for 25 or 30 years, it's not too bad. But, you know, so John has a lot of levers at his disposal, but reserve replenishment is not just budget turn back. It's budget turn back, it's revenue enhancement, and, you know, there are a few other things, the details of which I won't bore you with. But
Okay.
we're planning on going after that 1.7 million, especially when the boss says that to us.
Okay, and then furthermore, when the FEMA reimbursements, the 75% FEMA reimbursements come in, that will be recognized a year in, not in the free cash of January 30th, 2020, but it'll be recognized in the free cash of June 30th of 2021, correct?
Yeah, as John said, we expect those reimbursements to come in after the end of the year. Again, you're jumping into some of the weeds of the accounting department. We have about 385 different funds. We have some different accounting rules, but in general, those reimbursements would be for expenses of a prior year, and in general, the state accounting rules require us to turn that back to free cash.
A couple of questions I have about the CARES funding. Is there a risk of losing the CARES grant funding if a revenue use allowance does not become available? You said that you were holding a fair chunk of the CARES possibility in reserve. Sorry, I shouldn't use the word reserve. You're not utilizing all of the potential CARES grant because you are curious to see if it can become available for operating cost later. Is there a risk of losing that if we don't use it? And is there something that we could be using it for to assure receipt of those funds at this time?
So we're not reserving it because we're reserving for two reasons. First of all, we don't have 2 million expenses to ask for it. We don't need 2 million of expenses for COVID right now. So we're only asking for what we know we need right now. We have until December 30th to spend more, and we're going to do a ton of work this summer on building out and re-envisioning several programs and services to adapt them to this new environment. A huge amount of expenses will come down the line with PPE. One thing that's happened with MEMA, Mass Emergency Management Agency, is they've been distributing to us on a weekly basis a lot of PPE, masks, hygiene stuff, cleaning, and they are basically saying, okay, you guys need to start buying it yourselves now. So our expenses are going to start to increase more than they had been for things like that in the short term. But as of right now, it's 425.
It does sound like you're not leaving anything on the table, and that's just what I want to verify.
Right.
Next, corollary to that is, and I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to this. You're the first entity I've had the opportunity to ask this question of. Are there CARES grant funding available to the school side for the changes that they're going to have to make? And is it different because they're a regionalized school district versus most towns where it's part of the municipal budget? Is there CARES money that could flow through the town to help on the school budget side? Which, you know, I realize it's work for you, but it's all the same taxpayer base. So, and if the answer is since it's a regional school district, they got to do their own work, that's fine. But if there is CARES money available for COVID response, since we're not at our $2 million, almost $100,000 CARES grant, is there money that can flow through the town to go to the school?
So to answer your question, the money that's distributed to towns is for towns and school districts that the town utilizes. And the school district also has access to funding that we don't have access to. And I know they're using some of that and they plan to use some of that, but there may be a need to discuss how that funding may be shared. As I mentioned, we really are just in the beginning. We found out about this resource about 2 weeks ago, and we're working our way through it. And we always work collaboratively with the school district, and we intend to do that in this case as well. Great,
and I understand entirely if since it's regionalized, if they've got to do their own work, they got to do their own work. But if there is an opportunity for you to help, remember it's all the same taxpayer basis for it. Couple of questions about your presentation. Can you give a little more background on why you picked 5, 10, and 15% reduction levels in both state aid and local receipts? Is that just small, medium, and large, or is there some other driving factor for why you used those levels?
They were hypothetical scenarios.
Okay, so not based on any I don't know what the word I'm looking for here is. You're just using those three values. It's not that you saw a forecast somewhere that says this, that, or the other. Correct?
We looked at what happened in past issues with revenues, and we thought that's an appropriate estimation. But everything is different, so we just thought it would be an appropriate way to demonstrate what shortfalls in those increments look like, to give you a sense of the scope of the problem, and then compare that to the levers that we have available to us to give you a sense of what we'd be dealing with. So every recession is different, but I think there are things that we've learned from the past, and some of that was incorporated into the hypothetical scenarios. But 5, 10, and 15% is, I think, a good sampling to give you a sense of what it might look like.
For those of you on the committee who've been on for a couple of years, I'm having a flashback to Bill Mullins, and every recession is its own snowflake. Just as a reminder for the older members here. Let's see. I want to call out that I applaud the planning in case federal money becomes readily available for shovel-ready work. That I could definitely see that being something that happens in the world of land of our politics. I would ask that. So I realize you're looking for a vote on this tonight, and the ALG is tomorrow morning, and this time is quite compressed on this. Can you speak to, on slide 20, can you speak to the timing of these potential levers? In particular, the first and the last, the keep hiring freeze in place, and the continued non-essential spending freeze and delayed capital projects. You've got under the capital projects, you've got the entire year's worth of capital projects. Actually, yeah. So my question there is, when do you anticipate declaring an all clear? Is this something I know you say you'll check it month to month, but in your planning, so you've now described all the you've described all the possible levers, but you haven't described for us your timing. You haven't described for us which ones you're planning on using and in which time frame. So obviously, if we don't hire anybody for the year, we got $650,000 in savings, and if we decide to hold off on all of the capital projects, that's $1.275 million. When do you have to start pulling the trigger on the contracts for the different things? When do those savings either materialize or erode? And so, while I appreciate that this is describing the levers, I'm not actually seeing the plan. And I would have much preferred to see some of the, I hate to be so computer programmatic about this, but I would love to have seen some if-then statements rather than these are all the levers available to us. I would have liked to have seen what you're actually planning on doing.
Well, we have planned several scenarios, but it's difficult to anticipate when things will happen. I think that one of the bigger indicators to help us understand what we're up against will be the state budget.
I was about to, by all means, I'll let you finish, but I was about to ask, when are we supposed to hear what state aid is going to be?
Probably not before town meeting. I'm hopeful that we will, but I think, I'm sorry, I got distracted by chatting here. Hold on a second. So the beginning of your question is, when are these things going to happen? So we're not going to take the hiring and spending freeze off on July 1st. We're going to keep it in place as information becomes available. If we get word from the state that this is happening, let's say everything's getting a 0% increase, then we have a level of certainty, certain level of certainty of things. If we get other news, we have levers that we can use to adjust and react to those news or to that news. If revenues come in short at the first quarter, we'll know for sure not to start bringing people back. I mean, I think this is in place for the summer. The way I see it, we're in a holding pattern for the summer, which the fiscal year starts in 3 weeks. So I think we have a budget that we're recommending, and I think we have a plan to address anything that happens to revenues that we're anticipating as the news arrives. We have nothing to go on right now other than what happened 10 years ago. But as you mentioned, this snowflake is going to be different. So we can't prescribe what's going to happen at this point.
Thank you. Two last things. Two of the, Mr. Majors, I'll kindly ask you not to do that, Mr. Majors. Two things in your presentation that I would like to suggest are not necessarily cuts. While I am very happy to see that the amount requested for the Kelly's Corner land taking is not as much as before, that is a windfall. I appreciate that people did more work on the grants, and that's great news. I'm glad that the state picked up more of the money, but I find it hard to call that a cut. There's been no.
We're out there hustling.
And I appreciate that.
Doing all this work, we're advocating for the town. The state believes in us, and they're taking on more of an investment because they believe in the hard work of our team. So it's not a windfall. It's a result of hard work of our team.
It's also not a cut. The other one that is definitely not a cut, and I would caution how you phrase it, the savings for the North Acton Fire Station, I don't consider that to be savings. This is delaying what would have been the first year of long-term capital payment. So in the immediate term for the FY21 budget, it may not cost you as much, but it's not a long-term savings. So I'd be careful about that.
We didn't have it was a long-term savings. We said it was a savings in 21.
Fine, but it's also not a cut. And so my argument is, and my final line here, and then I will let Mr. Majors jump in since he clearly wishes to. My final point on this is the change that you presented in the budget from March to now is $215,000. That is not a very large change, and I do not believe it is commensurate with the amount of trouble that we're going to have coming down the line. And you are still taxing to the max, and you have not made adjustments in preparation of what I believe is going to be a relatively impactful FY21. Don't feel that you've taken this as seriously as you need to. And $215,000, I do not believe is commensurate with the issues that we're going to see in the future. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm hoping that it's not as big a deal as I expected. Thank you.
Mike, did you want to go first, then Christy? Christy, you can go first.
Thank you very much for sharing with us the information about the expenses that you've had so far from COVID. I think David Martin mentioned something about frustration with our lack of debate in the last meeting about approving the school budget, but pushing more back on the town budget. And I think in that specific case, the school had been very explicit with us about what they needed money for, specifically preparing for next school year, especially around the preparation for handling how different things might be. Your new budget doesn't have, from what I can see, any predicted COVID expenses. You've cut back on a few capital expenses, and you say, I know with your bottom line budget, you can move things in there, but this is a little of the not really telling us what's going on. You just said that MEMA is not going to be giving us as much PPE. We're going to have to start buying it for us. Can you give us a sense of what those things are expected to be? It just makes the budget more real in our minds if we have that data, and it's less of a, we do trust you, but less of a trust us. We've got it.
So to answer your question about COVID expenses in FY21, we're going to be asking the CARES Act to distribute about $350,000 to us in FY20. So the balance will be available for us for COVID-related expenses in FY21. We are going to look to that as a primary source to handle any COVID-related expenses in FY21. All the work that we do will probably have a COVID response flavor to it. But if there's things that are directly related to it, we're going to push to have them paid fully by the CARES Act appropriation that is waiting for us. With regards to the specific information about the cost of PPE, the cost for PPE has changed on a daily and weekly basis. I can try to get you analysis of what it costs per unit if that's helpful to you, but we've been acquiring it from several sources in any way that we can to make sure that our employees are protected. And we got a great donation from someone this week for our election and for our town meeting, so we're all set there. And we're going to continue to work on that. Specific expenses, again, we're in phase, I think we're still in phase 1 of the governor's reopening plan, and we're preparing for phase 2 and phase 3 and phase 4, and there'll be costs associated with all those. But given that this is our first time going through this, we can't give you specific cost items for what they're going to be. We just know that we're going to use the funding that's available and preserve the funding that's in the FY21 budget for the services that our community expects.
Thank you. I think it would be helpful for us and certainly give I'm having a hard time coming up with the right word. I mean, no offense by this, but credibility is the word that comes to mind for the overall process. If we knew more about what was going on, and I don't mean specific details, just we put this much aside, we think, for unexpected COVID expenses, and it's going to be coming from the CARES Act, like what you just said to us.
1.7 million.
If you include that in the information you give us, that will be much more helpful. That level of information gives me more confidence in understanding what's happening, which I think is key for us being able to advise going forward.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think I had one more question. 1 second. This is going to be for Steve Barrett. Do we have any idea, given the insanity happening, what to assume going forward we should expect for Middlesex retirement? I'm wondering what we have budgeted in next year's budget for their increase and how reasonable we think that is at this point in time.
Thank you for that question. I was going to say, you sound like my supervisor, John Mangiarotti. John's been kind of working me over about Middlesex for, I don't know, a couple of months now. So as town treasurer, I sit on the overall advisory board to Middlesex. You got to remember, Middlesex retirement system, like retirement systems in the state, are governed by PERAC. So the PERAC, Public Employee Retirement Commission, they put out some guidance that at the end of the day, as long as the retirement systems are paid for the fiscal year, the town, that's fine. To your specific point, the Middlesex retirement system did not reduce their own internal budget. There was a flat line 0%. But right now, there has been no adjustments made to our retirement assistance contribution in total. So that number did not go down. We have some more time to pay it in my own mind. And we'll be talking with John about whether or not, we pay all in one lump and get a 2% discount, those type of things. But if your question was, has your assessment been lowered or pushed out? Right now, it hasn't, no.
So I was assuming it would be increased.
No, our FY21 assessment is the same.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm sorry, I had one more. Apologies. I'll raise my hand again when I find out what my other question was.
Mike Majors.
Yeah, just a few questions. Yeah, we asked you to come up with different scenarios, and it seems like you've accomplished that. it could be debatable why we chose or why you chose 5, 10, 15. But getting back to the snowflake model, who knows? 5, 10, 15% is quite reasonable. I think the economy and tax revenue plan, especially from real estate taxes, is for Acton, seems to have been proven to be pretty stable and predictable. Looks like we're going to make it through fiscal 20 in very good shape. 21 is the question, but it's who knows what that could be. And I think if the 5, 10, 15% model proves to be inadequate, we could adjust it deeper. Couple questions about personnel is, how critical is not having a town engineer on board for the upcoming year?
It's now that we're entering the construction season and sort of the construction is back in business, it's going to start to be a strain on particularly Corey and the other engineering staff that we have, and we're going to continue to work through it, but it is not something that we can necessarily sustain for the long term. We have a lot of work planned, a lot of exciting infrastructure projects that are underway already, funded already, that we need to complete and work on, things that are proposed. So we hope to have an engineer in place soon, but given the financial uncertainty, we're taking the necessary step of holding that position and several others just to make sure that we're not bringing someone in as we're about to make other hard decisions.
Yeah, one final question, or actually statement. This seemed like a pretty challenging and interesting exercise. It would almost be nice to see this happen every year. To take a chunk out of that budget and just lower our tax rate a bit, take some pressure off the homeowner. Budgets just seem like they rise because they rise, but there's no reason why you could just put a stopgap in future years and just say, okay, our growth is 0 for 1 year. Just a comment.
Thanks, Mike. Sahana?
So are we just going through the questions or comments allowed to?
Questions, comments on what John presented?
Okay. So before I move on to commenting on the budget, John, I would like to actually recognize the excellent effort that you have been doing in respect to securing the grants for the town. And from your presentation, it's actually commendable that you have been able to secure about $1.1 million for the town so far. And I believe this does not include the Kelly's Corner infrastructure project as well. So, and also what you've been saying, the CARES Act, which might come in soon too. So this is a lot of grants that you have secured for the town. So thank you for that. With respect to the budget, I see that, this revised budget is, I like it, and I'm in support of it. It also includes on the slide 20 that Jason commented, the contingency options. I'm comfortable with that. And also one additional comment that I wanted to make from our last meeting, one of the comments that Mike May just made, we should actually not be micromanaging the town staff. And I fully support that view. And thank you, Mike, for making that comment. It hit home, and I've been thinking about it, and it is very true that we need to respect that. That's it.
Mr. Nolde?
Thank you. Over the past few weeks, I think there's been a general consensus of skepticism regarding the thoughtfulness of the town planners about the current situation. And I think that what we wanted was what was presented tonight, which is just proof, demonstration that the town planners are considering some worst case scenarios. And I think that the budget cutbacks of 5, 10, and 15% are appropriate. They're certainly in line with my thinking, given the basis that I think that Acton, the county we live in, New England in general, is a bit of a bubble compared to the rest of the United States. And if you consider that the United States in general is approximately 26% unemployment at the moment, which is more than double normal in recent recessions, then I think that Acton should experience at least 25% of that in lost revenue. So I think 5% represents that, and I think getting up to 15% represents more than 50% of that figure as a lost revenue basis. My only comment would be to encourage the town planners to think in terms of stagflation in the future, that our growth would not be limited, but instead would be inverse, that we would be in a situation where we actually lose revenue in the process over the future. So I don't have any specific questions. I just want to say that I think the presentation answers a lot of my questions regarding what the planners' thoughts are. And I think they've demonstrated that they're thinking in line in a lot of the same ways that I would be thinking. And I believe that they've demonstrated that they have the ability to make cuts, at least for fiscal year 20 and 21 if needed. And I would just encourage the planners to continue to not add items to the town budget that incur long-term or in perpetuity additions. And I think the fact that they're not hiring new staff is part of that. So those are my only comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam, and congratulations on being sworn in as a full member. We appreciate that. Mr. Wellinghoff.
No comments from me. Thank you.
Thank you. John, I want to thank you for presenting that this evening. I have a question in regards to Town Hall. Once we get back to the considered new normal, is a town installing like plexiglass where normally when you walk up to the counter, something that keep,
Yeah, we actually already have them
open, and I know that might not be feasible going forward, and you might have to put some kind of partition between whoever's up there to see the planning department or the building or the clerk's office or Brian's office to give their tax donation to the town.
Yeah, if anyone was at the election yesterday, you saw the plexiglass dividers that were in front of the check-in people, and checkout people. We have employed those throughout Town Hall at counters, and we actually have them in some people. We actually have them in front of people's desks as well, in the back office in some cases, just to try to have a higher level of safety. We're trying not to make permanent modifications to the building, if possible, unless it's absolutely necessary. But we are going to be looking at several items, including plexiglass, to make sure that we're doing things safely once things open back up.
Yeah, I just think once they've taken all the vaccine or something, this is put behind us, that it might not be a bad idea to have stuff like that during the flu season, etc. So I'm just hoping that's permanent. Christy, you have a follow-up?
Yes, I figured out what my other question / comment was. I think Mr. Benson and Mr. Martin and I have had somewhat of a philosophical difference in point of view relative to the budget that I would like everyone to think about their positions on. We, I believe, mostly as families have tightened our belts, various households. If we have not specifically, we know many people who have. And the way this cut to the budget has come down, it doesn't really feel like belt tightening. It's decreasing. I'm with Jason on the what looks like a cut to Kelly's Corner. I wouldn't call it a windfall, but it's not really that we decided not to spend money on something. The town did wonderful hard work to make it so we didn't have to spend money, but that happened before we had to start thinking about any belt tightening. And this, I think, goes back to the question that came up last time about the ADA bathroom. Well, I think it is vital to have an ADA bathroom there. That does seem like a relatively easy place, again, to just put that off until we see what's happening regarding all the other revenue that we have. I appreciate Selectman Martin's point of view that the town government should have the money it needs because of the bottom line budget to handle anything that comes up. And for me, it becomes a question of balancing that with how much we let people keep their own money for their own problems like that come up. Because we're in a time where we're trying to look as taxpayers here of how much of my money in this year in which we've unfortunately, all of this is lined up with this giant school expense. How much money do we let people of theirs keep to hold on to versus distributing it to the town to help everyone out with? I think having the town available to help is a little different from the state and federal government because we help people in a different way. There aren't these social programs that help, or if there are, please tell me about them. We're not helping with rent assistance. We have that now from CARES Act, but that's not something coming out of the town budget. And we're not helping to feed people. We're not helping with the basics that people need help with right now. So one of the more obvious ways to me is to cut back more on the budget. You can't go too deep with it. I don't think we've gone very deep, frankly, at all. But I think one of the big ways to help the taxpayers right now and the overall economic health of the town would be to cut the budget some more and let people keep more of their money to get through this tough time.
I have a comment, Roland, if I might.
Just one quick second, I'll let you comment, John.
Yeah.
I know as I start looking at next year's budget, FY22, and I know we've got to say, hey, we need to replace X number of police cruisers. Well, maybe it's time, due to this whole environment, that maybe we run our cruisers another year, get another year of life out of them, and then turn them over. So, see if we can stretch equipment usage longer than we normally would on a replacement cycle. It's something to consider. It's a way to save money. Anyway, John, go ahead.
I just, Christy, in brief response, I get it in terms of people and the pain and the uncertainty, from a law firm's perspective, you are constantly on the watch for new business. You could work off inventory for so long, but with new business, whether it's in IT or in law, if you don't have it, then there has to be, cuts along the way inside your establishment, which then affects how families live. And that's all true, and it's very fair and real. On the town side, we're in the business of providing services to people. And those services, continue whether we're in a good time, or a bad time. We need our policemen to cover our 4 quadrants around town. We need our firemen, to be on duty to answer various emergencies. We need the town, to keep functioning, to provide services for all of our citizens. So it's a very different, model than law firms or IT establishments. And I would just ask you to consider it that way.
Thanks, John. I would like to have a vote this evening on the revised budget from the Finance Committee, so we don't keep dragging this out any longer than it really needs to be. So do I have a motion of some sort from somebody? Ms. Noldy?
Was that a motion from you? Because if it was, I'll second it.
No, I don't make the motion. I have somebody motion.
Okay. Then I make a motion that we vote on the revised town budget as presented.
Okay. Do a second?
I
Please.
second it.
Hold on. He's voting that are you saying we should move to recommend or not recommend? Don't we have to
Oh.
pick one? He just wants to vote on it.
Thank you.
And usually,
we need to recommend.
the actual the dollar value in there. So I would call up the draft warrant article. I'm not going to make this motion because I'm going to vote against it. But the number you're looking for, Adam, is 35,615,202.
Then I would make the motion that we approve the town budget for 35 million.
Recommend.
Recommend as stated by Jason Cole.
There's a second.
Again,
All right. So we'll take a roll call vote. Christie,
Nay.
Jason,
Nay.
Sahana,
yes.
Mike,
Aye. Yes.
Adam,
I will vote for it. Aye.
David Wellinghoff, which I don't see where he is. I vote aye in favor. At this point, do we wait for David for a minute or so to reappear?
Yeah, give him a minute.
Okay.
This is important.
It will not change the outcome. Even if he votes nay, it would still carry. But by all means, I recommend we wait a minute for him.
Mr. Wellinghoff, we took a vote while you were gone. We had a second and we had a motion by Adam to approve the revised budget of 35,615,202, and seconded by Sahana. Christie voted nay. Jason, nay. Sahana, yes. Me, yes. Mike, yes. And waiting for your vote.
I'll vote yes.
Adam also said yes.
I said Adam said yes, didn't I? Oh, sorry if I didn't. All right, so the motion passes. Second item. Does Mr. Barrett or Brian have any further update to the finance department at this time?
Nope. Thank you, though.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Jason.
before we move off of that first agenda item, do we not need to, I guess the first question is, when does the warrant go to the printer? Do we need to have a conversation about the other articles that are deferred at this time? Or are we going to do that in a subsequent meeting?
We can discuss them now if you like.
Okay. So,
I'll have you lead that part, please.
sure. But I think the first thing that is deferred on here is Article 9, Real Property Disposition 3 School Street. You mentioned last meeting that this is just to give the Board of Selectmen the opportunity to dispose of this if something comes up. Again, in the interest of, I'd like to know what the plan is rather than just give carte blanche. So if you would like to discuss it for a minute, Mr. Benson, please do, or Mr. Mangiarotti. But at this point, I don't see a plan for the disposition of 3 School Street other than you send out an RFQ or RFP, and we don't actually have a plan at this time. Is that accurate?
So thank you. The RFP, we issued an RFP. So one of the goals that I think I heard from the Finance Committee is we need to try to better maintain our inventory of facility assets. And I thought that this was a great opportunity to dispose of one of these assets to try to have less things for us to maintain in the long term and in the short term, for that matter. So the Board of Selectmen supported a vote to declare that property as surplus. And we issued an RFP to see if there was development interest or some other interest in someone buying it from the town. the proposal that we did receive was not deemed to be suitable. The board did not accept that proposal. And so we're in a position now where we're recrafting an RFP to go back out and try again. And we believe that we would have better interest this time based on what we learned and some of the feedback we got from the initial RFP round. And the reason that I believe the board chose to keep this on the warrant now is that real estate property disposition is difficult timing wise if you have to wait for a town meeting. And so the idea here is that the board declares surplus. They would like to dispose of it for a purpose based on an RFP, and they can't do that unless the town meeting authorizes them to exercise that authority. And so that's the goal here. There has been discussions of using it for a small commercial space, a small perhaps potentially combining with next door parcels to do something interesting. That was the proposal that we received initially. It just was not ready to go, and the price not good enough. But we think that if we go back out again, we'll get better proposals, and that's the reason that we're bringing it forward at this time.
Does anybody else have any other questions, or should I make a motion at this time?
Make a motion if nobody has any questions.
I move that we do not recommend Article 9. There is a lack of monetary value at play here, and there is no clear plan. I am not inclined to give carte blanche without seeing what the plan would be. This allows for the sale of the property or the use of a property in a way that we cannot recommend to the town. So I move that we do not recommend Article 9.
Do I have a second?
Second, but then I have some questions.
Okay, further discussion? Go ahead.
When these articles have come up in my tenure on this committee, it's come from the other side where we've had an idea of what we're doing with the parcel. How is this normally handled? I understand that we have a piece of property that we would like to explore disposing of, and it seems to me that what we're saying here is we need the town's permission to do that. I guess my question is partially for Jason. How would this, in your view, be handled differently?
I would love to know what the results of the RFP are. I would love to know what the Board of Selectmen plan on getting for the value of the property, rather than just say yes, we relinquish plans for it. Go do your thing. I'd like to actually see what we're going to get for it, and then we can make a recommendation on whether it's better to hold this property and hold out for something better, or whether it's good to sell at this time. Obviously, if they come back with a nice, good proposal, we're going to get some good revenue out of it. I'm going to be all for it, and let's move forward. And I'm sorry to make them have to come back to a subsequent town meeting to execute on it. But I don't. This is too carte blanche. This allows them to say, "Oh, somebody wants to take it off our hands for $10. Let's do it." Not that I think that they would, but if we're supposed to be recommending on what the town does, I'd like to actually see the proposal rather than just say, "Okay, yeah, you can dispose of it anytime you want."
So to clarify that a little, to reword that, you think it is, as our committee's job to advise financially, we need to, in this case, have more of the idea of what the finances are related to the properties that are being sold.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, I was on mute. John, go ahead.
Thank you. I want to bring the finance committee back to the presentation that I gave to you when we were back at the Acton TV studios. It might have been February when we went over the facility capital plan and talked a lot about some of the facility projects that are in our 5-year plan, and we went into great detail on each of those things. One item that we talked about that day is the facility studies recommended maintenance and capital needs for this facility. And I can read those to you. Priority 1 needs were $67,000. $23,000. Priority 2 needs, $285,000. Priority 3 needs, $225,000. So we have here an old garage that has been used as a firehouse and several other uses. It's now used for storage. According to our facility study, it has approximately $500,000 in deferred maintenance that we would need to address to maintain that building. The Board of Selectmen have declared it as surplus. We intend to try to sell it to try to recover some funding to offset the cost of that. If nothing else, release the need to have to invest in the long term and spend this money to maintain such a small building without necessarily need for our municipal operations. So the financial analysis that I have before you is it's going to cost us $500,000 according to the study to maintain this building. The proposal that Selectmen rejected for several reasons, including the price, I believe was $60,000 to $70,000 was what was proposed, and it wasn't accepted. So that's as much information that I can give to you about financial analysis. An RFP provides an opportunity for a building to reuse for a public purpose, and the public purpose may not always be highest dollar value. There may be other needs that could be addressed through an RFP, but at a minimum, it would remove our necessity to have to maintain this building, which is, for me, we have dozens of small buildings throughout the community, and one of the things that I'm trying to do here is have less of them to try to deal with.
And I applaud having less of them to have to deal with it, and it does not cost $60,000 a year to let a building rot. I would like to see what the use is before I sign off on it. Before we recommend or not recommend the use of that space.
Sorry, my son disrupted me. Christy, go. You got another question? Mike Majors.
Yeah, this is the civil defense building, right?
Yes.
Right. Well, it's kind of a unique building, and it seems like South Acton is going to be the next growth area for the town of Acton. And it's just too bad that there's not a master plan for South Acton that there was for West Acton and Acton Center, and should be one for North Acton. But I think that's such a unique building, it could be somehow, or it should be somehow incorporated into part of that redevelopment plan. But based on your comments in the financial analysis, it sounds like some very expensive maintenance is required, and it maybe for the greater good of all, maybe we should just tear it down. If we can't redevelop it and make it something unique, and we'll never get our money's worth from a third party. Let the fire department practice putting out fires with it. Just my opinion.
Christy?
John, thank you very much. That's exactly the type of information I need to be able to make a good decision about this.
Adam?
I'll start by apologizing if I don't have a full grasp of the situation, but if it has $500,000 plus of deferred maintenance, and I know the property, I live in South Acton, and there's no way that building's even worth $500,000, and there was an offer for $67,000, why wouldn't we accept that if the alternative is tearing it down?
Well, the very reason we didn't accept that proposal was that it wasn't submitted in the form that was required. That's why I suggested that I think if we did it again, we may have more luck, or not luck, but a better result in getting more proposals that are presented in the way that they're supposed to be. There was a lot of information that wasn't in the proposal that was supposed to be, and the price wasn't deemed enough at the time, but I think if the proposal was developed further, that's something that the Board of Selectmen, so this article doesn't sell the property, it doesn't dispose of the property, it simply gives the Board of Selectmen the authorization and do that in what they deem to be the best interest of the town. And the Board of Selectmen determine what's in the best interest of the town based on their role in the organization.
So
make a nice. I was going to say, make a nice parking lot for a restaurant down there.
Yeah, that's part of the train station too, that is exactly. But Adam,
So I'll apologize again for not maybe not fully understanding the issue, and I'll give my next question to Jason, which is, Jason, can you give me, and I apologize for wasting everybody's time with this question, but Jason, could you just give me a better explanation of what the opposition to the warrant article is?
I have no idea what they plan on using it for. Therefore, I cannot make a recommendation on whether or not it's going to have an impact to the town. If you turn it over to a private business that has one, if you sell it for a wind song to a private business that has a different impact on the town versus deciding to put in multiple units of affordable housing, which would have a completely different economic impact to the town. Until I know what the actual plan is, I cannot make a recommendation on what to do with that parcel. Since I do not have that information in hand, I cannot make a recommendation for it. And I do not wish to give carte blanche to the Board of Selectmen with regard to this parcel.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to see the town get rid of it because we seem to have several properties throughout the town. We have that one. We have Morrison Farm, where the house has been sitting vacant. I've been here for 15 years. It's been sitting vacant for 15 years. And we have the fire station on Woodbury. Not Woodbury, on in West Acton there. On
Windsor.
Windsor.
That, you know, you're going to keep one of them, but keep the Windsor. But that's personal. I would like to see a town explore something to do with making the Morrison Farms, been discussed in the past, making that house into a affordable housing unit, and you know, reconfiguring how the driveway goes in, configuring the backyard, what have you, because these three properties are not bringing any tax revenues into the town, and they're sitting there and they're not being utilized. They're being underutilized, and so mine is if the Board of Selectmen can move forward with doing something, I have no problem doing with the RFP to see where we land. It still has to go to the town if they're going to sell it. You can't just, what I believe in, John Mangiarati can correct me if I'm wrong, that the RFP is just being able to give the town the opportunity to explore what to do with the property.
It allows for the disposition. It's not just a right to give an RFP. It allows the Board of Selectmen to dispose of it.
Right, it authorizes the board to use their discretion as chief elected officials to determine how best to dispose of that property. The thing about real estate transactions, as many of you know, is timing is often a big part of it. And sometimes there's a great proposal that's brought before you that due to timing, we're not able to accept. And then something that we could have benefited from, we don't have the opportunity to do. I wish that the proposals that we received earlier this year were perfect and we could have brought them forward and completed the transaction as was the plan, but that's not what happened. But I do think that having the ability of the board to act in a relatively shorter time frame than what's usually necessary if you have to go to town meeting again, I think would benefit this parcel. But that's the proposal before town meeting, and I'm happy to provide any additional information.
Or Dave Longhouse have a question?
Can I make a motion?
No, there is already a motion on the table that has been seconded.
Sorry. To recommend it?
To
What?
not recommend.
To not recommend it. Okay.
Adam?
One final question, which is if we vote to not recommend this warrant, does that mean that the disposition of this parcel is subject to town vote then by the town constituency?
Yeah,
So, oh, sorry, go ahead.
go ahead, John.
So if the finance committee does not recommend the article, it would still go forward to town meeting. If town meeting decides not to approve the article, then we would not have the Board of Selectmen would not have the authority to dispose of the parcel until either a subsequent request to a future town meeting, or it would just be, we'd just move on and attend to other business.
Christie?
If this article were to pass at town meeting, how long would the right for the Board of Selectmen do this stick around? Would it expire after 3 years if nothing came of it, or is this in perpetuity until the property is disposed of?
I can get a legal opinion for you, but I don't believe there's a set time frame for how long the authority lasts. But I can certainly get a legal opinion if that's helpful.
Adam?
Sorry, another question. Has the board had the authority to dispose of such properties in the past, especially in the recent past? And if so, have they done so in a prudent fashion?
Well, in my short term here, I believe the only parcel that we sold through an RFP process by the board was a Habitat for Humanity project on School Street, which is a property that the town sold to an individual who developed it for, I believe, for veterans housing. Was that right, Steve? Mark's the one that
Affordable housing.
Yeah. So that's the only one that I've been involved in some way, but
Wasn't Asa Parlin also given to the selectmen, or the selectmen voted to dispose of it, but wisely it didn't happen, and out of the ashes of neglect, we're going to rehabilitate that building into a pretty unique, I think, according to John, conference space or meeting space that's sorely needed by the town. I believe that was on a death knell and then was somehow given a second life.
Adam, you have another question?
I'll just make one final comment before we vote, which is that our Board of Selectmen are elected officials elected by constituents such as ourselves. And I think we have to make a decision to either trust them or not trust them in such a situation. And I would say that personally, I feel a certain sense of trust in having our board make a decision rather than just leaving it in the hands of a single individual within the town. I don't know that it necessarily needs or requires the oversight of the financial committee. I think it would be helpful to at least have some opinions on that. So I guess my final comment is just that I think I trust the board, and so I guess my way to express that would be to vote at this point.
Okay. Any other comments? Let's vote. Christie?
I appreciate Jason's concerns with this lack of information in it. I think also, given that it's such a financial drag on the town if we were to do anything with it, I have enough information, and the speed with which financial transactions generally need to happen. I have enough information to be comfortable supporting this from recommending this article, which would be voting against this motion.
Okay, so you're a nay.
I'm a nay, even though I seconded.
Jason?
Aye.
Mike Majors?
Let me just clarify, a nay or a yes says what to this article?
This is a motion to not recommend to the article.
A motion to not recommend. Nay.
Sahana?
Nay.
Dave? Well, no.
Nay.
Adam?
I'm going to vote nay, and I'm going to make the comment that we should all do our best to keep an eye on how this progresses so that we can consider future such votes.
Also a nay. So, do I have a motion for somebody to recommend it? Chris, or let's make it, go ahead, Christie.
Motion to recommend Article 9.
Seconded.
Okay. So I will start with Dave Wellinghoff,
Aye.
Sahana,
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
Jason,
Nay.
Mike Majors,
Aye.
Christie,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. Okay, Jason, what's the other article?
Actually, I'm afraid I have to step away for about 15, 20 minutes and take care of something that just came in, work-related. The next article that we have not weighed in on, just that you can have the conversation, is Article 10, which is the zoning change for a parcel of land. I have to beg off and come back as soon as I possibly can. My apologies for stepping aside for a couple of minutes.
Go ahead, and hear what you have to do. And turn off your camera. All right, so we fill the quorum. We did until Adam just kind of, Adam's still there. Okay. Sorry.
I'm still listening. I'm just hunting for a power cord. I'm sorry.
Oh, so you're not hunting for rabbits or something. We're okay.
I got one here, Adam, if you need.
I do not have the I do not have the warrant. I don't have the revised warrant in front of me. Christie, go ahead.
This is the article about 32 Weatherby Street. This is the one right behind Teamworks and abutting the Roos Freeman Rail Trail. It's about whether to amend the zoning from residence to East Acton, residence 2 to East Acton Village 2. East Acton Village 2 would allow it to have higher density there. At the time of the draft warrant that I have, which is dated 5/27, the Board of Selectmen's recommendation was TBD.
Mr. Benson, can you comment on that?
Yeah, the gentleman, John Durkin, came in on Monday night and offered comments. Now, just by way of explanation, there is an existing industrial building on the parcel. It's an odd-shaped parcel, as you can see from the map. It is in a residential district. It abuts the East Acton Village 2 district. He reports he has, no plans to do anything with the 32 Weatherby Street parcel. He just wants flexibility in potential future development on it, so we can do something commercial or industrial with it. I suspect we would likely recommend the article, but just from the comments that were made, just did not get a chance to vote on it.
Okay.
But there was nothing magical with it.
All right. Is there any anyone want to make a motion, or anyone further discussion? Like Majors?
Yeah, if that Teamworks wanted to put athletic field there, that would be allowed in your proposed rezoning?
I believe it would, yeah, because yeah.
Future
that's
home
good.
dog park. Any further discussion? Dave?
Do we have any sense at all what financial impact could come of this approval of this article? I know it's vague and so on and so forth, but I would think, at least I would want to hear more, a little bit more about the zoning designation. Could it be more tax revenue? Could it be less? I mean, otherwise, why do we have an interest in this?
His explanation for it, it's a piece of real estate. He has no plans for the parcel. He just wants flexibility as to how he could develop it. And abuts the East Acton Village District 2, and That was really all he had to say.
Does Brian or Steve Barrett know what the tax impact is on it right now? If they change the zoning, would the tax impact stay the same? I guess it's a Brian question, being the assessor.
No, offhand, Roland. I mean, obviously, whatever zoning changes are made, it depends on what the owner wants to do with it. I mean, that's all going to go to the bottom line. What's the end game here? What's it going to look like when it's all said and done? So I couldn't tell you. I wouldn't know.
Christy?
I'm reaching into my memory a little, back when we first talked about this. The purpose of the village zonings that you see, West Acton Village, East Acton Village, is to promote the idea of making a more walkable and high-density residential area. And frequently the zonings allow there to be some form of business on the property, often owner-occupied business, and there are limitations to, or requirements for what you have for parking, etc. My recollection for this specific unit or this specific lot was that this would allow there to be higher density residential zoning than it has right now with the RA2, that you could fit more units on there. So then I know if Jason was here, he'd be worried that that would mean more kids in the schools. If you can put more units there, the property inherently becomes worth more value. That's not saying that's what he's going to do with it. But unless someone can give me more detailed information, I can look further into the zoning information, but that's my recollection of why he would want this to happen.
Adam Noldy?
And can I go?
All right, so Hannah can go and then Adam. Sorry, Adam.
Before further discussions, I want to know the recommendation from planning board. There is no recommendation from the planning board. Do any of you know why there is no recommendation? It's a zoning article, and just want to know.
Okay, Adam? Guess we don't know, so Hannah.
So again, to clarify and make sure I understand this correctly, we have a property owner asking for a zoning change with no proposed plan or reason specifically asking for the zoning change. Is that correct?
You're amending what's called a zoning map. You know, he's not coming in for any sort of special permit to build on it. That would go to the planning board. If it was a residential commercial, it would come to us. He's just looking, as he repeatedly said, no plan, just no plan for the land, just flexibility as to how I might be able to develop.
It seems to me that's a cart before the horse issue.
Hey, Wellinghoff, you have a question or a comment?
No, I just, to follow on to my original comments, I mean, without this person here to answer some basic questions, I mean, my general inclination is to vote against it, just because, if it could be high density housing, et cetera, I think we'd want to understand the implications of that. And it's all really relatively undefined and vague at this point. And it's nice that he wants flexibility, and I think we all can appreciate that to some extent. But as vague as this is, I'm kind of inclined. I haven't made a motion. I'm not making a motion now, but I'm just saying for discussion's sake.
Let me suggest this, Roland. If you could, I have Mr. Durkin's phone number. If you might want to give him a call and see if he's home and has a few minutes.
Could you give him a call for us while we're discussing this?
I have no idea how. Let me just call him on my cell phone. Is that how that?
Yeah, but I don't know how you call him on.
Can you call him and ask him to call into the meeting? Would that work?
Yeah.
All right, let me try him.
All right, you can put yourself on mute while you're doing that. That'd be great. I can mute you.
Sure, it's not past his bedtime.
Maybe past John's. Christy, go ahead.
I have the zoning bylaws up right here. This would allow him, currently it's zoned that it can have some agricultural uses, governmental and single-family home on it right now. If it becomes EAV2, East Acton Village 2, it can also have two-family, multifamily, and a variety of business uses, including retail stores, offices, which it is not currently allowed to have.
There's so much office space in this town, I don't think office space would
I'm just saying that this does greatly open up his options relative to the parcel. Don't know what I think about.
So in my mind, it seems like it's an ask to basically improve the property possibilities there so that probably can either be listed for sale or peddled out to developers in an effort to improve the value of the property. Not that it's not his right, but that would be my inference of the request.
Yeah, Onyx Corporation is a trucking, excavation, and landscape construction company.
That's who's on that property now, correct?
Right.
Yeah, I just called him. It was Onyx, and it was his business number, so there was no answer.
Okay.
Actually, I have Joan Gardner raise her hand, but it's gone now. I thought she just did.
Joan, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that that's close to where the bridge will go over Route 2. So the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail is close to that. So he might want to have something that would take advantage of the rail trail.
Thanks.
That's it.
Thank you. So, Christie?
I think at the end of the day, we just have to speculate based on what we know, whether we think it is of financial benefit to the town, what happens to this specific property.
Does anybody want to make a motion?
I will.
Go ahead.
I would make a motion that we reject the article.
That we not recommend.
Correct, not recommend the article.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Christie?
I'm not sure if Adam knows about the option of no recommendation. Just
Can you explain that, please?
It means we take no side on the issue.
In which case it's left up to the voters?
Well, I mean, it's all left up to the voters anyhow, but yeah, we're saying we don't take a stance.
I see. Got it. In that case, I'll leave my motion as it stands.
Okay, we had a second on that one? We did. So let's come to vote. Christie?
The motion was to not recommend.
Correct.
I will say nay.
To not recommend or to? Okay, say that. Okay. Mike Majors?
Yeah, or if it's not to recommend, I would vote against it.
Okay,
I think a no recommendation would be more appropriate.
Dave Wellinger?
Aye.
Sahana?
I would say nay too. I would lean towards not recommending. I mean, I would lean towards not making any recommendation.
Adam?
I'll vote aye.
I'm going to vote nay. So just, Christie, do you want to make another motion? Does somebody else want to make a motion? Mike?
I recommend, the motion would be to not make no recommendation on this article.
I second it.
Okay. Any further discussion? Come to vote. Dave Wellinghoff.
Nay.
You say nay?
Nay.
Aye.
Adam?
I'll vote aye on that.
Mike?
Aye.
Christie?
Aye.
And I'll also vote aye. Okay. What are the ones that we have to take a look at? Does anybody else know at this point? Go ahead, Christie.
Sorry, the warrant ends up in front of my control over the mute button. Article 13 about a budget transfer to see if the town will appropriate from available funds a sum of money to defray necessary expenses above the amount appropriated at the 2019 annual town meeting or take any other action relative thereto. We have deferred on it.
I'm trying to. John Mangiarotti still here?
Steve, is that a housekeeping article?
You know, I'm not sure. It actually, the motion says move that the town take no action. It was deferred by the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee.
It is, John. It's a annual kind of belts and suspenders article that we've had in place for a lot of years. You know, when you get to around April, that time of year, with year end within striking distance, we just had that in there as sort of a placeholder in case we needed it.
So do we need it this year, Mr. Barrett?
Not that we're seeing, no, sir.
So we voted to not recommend, correct? Correct, Christie?
No, we're voted to deferred, which is fine. It sounds like the article will not end up in there.
Okay. Is there any other articles that we have to be aware of this evening?
We have, I think there's a question of whether we want to reconsider Article 3, Kelly's Corner, since the number has changed. Same with the sidewalks, relative to the previous version of the draft that we had seen.
So the number's lower this time around, correct?
Yes, yes.
So do you want to make a vote on that one since we know it's low and we've proved it before?
Yep, let me just scroll back up to it. Is that Article 3, if anyone's at that end of the document?
Article 3, Kelly's Corner.
Motion to recommend Article 3.
Do I have a
Kelly's
second?
Corner.
Don't all speak at once.
Second.
All right, we'll come to vote. Adam, I'll start with you.
I'll abstain.
You do that. Sahana.
Aye.
Dave. Dave.
Aye.
Vote. Aye. Okay. Mike Majors.
Aye.
Christie.
Aye.
And I myself as an aye, so the motion passes. All right, I think does that wrap it up for the warrant article? John?
So Article 4 remains the same, but Article 5 is reduced.
Which is Article 5?
The free cash appropriations for capital.
Okay. Christie? You want to make a motion to that one?
Yes, so just if you aren't all looking at the warrant, this is the one talking about, John showed us this on the slide previously, the water resource study, public facility alarm and dispatch center improvements. It's the list of capital and infrastructure studies and improvements. This is the number that dropped from 900 some odd thousand down to 760,000. Is that the current number, John?
Yeah, that's the amount from free cash.
Okay. And I move that we recommend Article 5, Town Capital Infrastructure Studies and Improvements.
Who wants to second it?
Second.
Okay, from the vote, Sahana.
Aye.
Adam.
I'll abstain again.
Dave.
Aye.
Mike Majors.
Aye.
Christie.
Aye.
And myself as an aye. The motion passes. All right. That's good this evening.
Can I
So,
jump in for a second, Roland?
sure.
Why was the Maple Street lease article, why is there not an article about really leasing Maple Street at this point?
We We determined through town council that the board has the authority provided through previous articles to
Oh, good, okay.
that parcel.
So it's not that we are not considering lease at this point.
Correct.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, John. So is there any updates from the finance department this evening? Other than what we've already been over?
Well, there would be one, Mr. Chairman. We participated in a successful town election yesterday. Town clerk Skadarik, Eva Skadarik, Gail Sawyer out on point. Basically, one interesting concept, a lot of the election workers, or a bunch of them, given the nature of the virus, we basically had some of them that moved along, that didn't participate. So we backfilled with town staff. They did a great job, and they were led by John Mangiarotti, town manager, who was a precinct 3 check-in teller, but don't tell anyone.
I went yesterday to vote, and I'd say it was very smooth. I went right through, no issues. There's nobody there. It's great to vote at noontime. So the new norm is up to that. Is there any updates from the Board of Selectmen?
No.
Benson?
No.
Okay. As I read your email today, thank you very much. And we've already gone over that pretty much. Any other finance committee business? Any committee updates? Dave Wellinghoff.
Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to recommend that we adjourn for the evening.
Well, give it 1 second. So, Hannah, go ahead.
I just have a question from last week. I know Jason is not here, but any one of you can comment on it, or if no comments, that's fine too. The school building project, he did mention that there was nitrate problems. So I'm trying to understand this. So we are going to be spending $500K to resolve this nitrate problem. So would it have been a good idea to have gone with the sewers?
Does it matter?
It does. I want to know whether it would have helped.
It inherently would have. The problem with the nitrates is going to be a problem with the septic system. It can be, I don't think abatement is the right word. You can, in general, install filtration systems on septic systems that remove these nitrate problems. That said, the sewer's done, it's passed.
Yep, it's passed, but I just wanted to know that.
Yeah, it just feels like a dig.
So, do we need to have another meeting before town meeting? For the 29th?
I think that depends on ALG tomorrow, no?
Well, maybe calling another meeting. So, Mr. Wellinghoff, you made the motion. She just disappeared. Mr. Noldy.
I second.
Okay, I'll take a roll call. Christie.
Aye.
Mr. Majors.
Aye.
Sahana.
Aye.
Mr. Wellinghoff was not there. Jason, Dave made a motion to adjourn.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Aye.
I'm an aye. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Night.
Thanks.